In the news, and forgive yourself if you missed it, I saw it in the Missoulian about 2 weeks ago. Once again, they are thinking of closing down the United States Sheep Experimental Station in Du Bois, Idaho. And for some of you, this is really news because you didn't even know that there was a United States Sheep Experimental Station in Du Bois in the first place. And the only reason I really know of it is I've probably traveled I-15 between Salt Lake and Montana 30, 40, 50 times, and there it was on the off-ramp. And so one day I looked up to see who they were. It's a fascinating place. They exist for a number of reasons, but mainly this is where scientists and really bright technical people concentrate on the development of healthy and productive sheep, as well as maintaining an environment for them in terms of grazing. As I understand it, the entire conflict regarding their potential closure, which has been brewing for years and years and years, concerns budgets, of course, and tightening of belts, and also because the Sheep Experimental Station, which covers a lot of acreage, 28,000 in fact, intersects with that of grizzly bears and wolves. And so biologists and naturalists say that needless conflict with other species could really be averted if the thing just closed down. Fisco folks say that we already subsidize the ranching industry enough and that spending all that money on sheep is unadvisable. Even so, sheep ranchers and related industry people seem to have successfully made the case that the place and what they do there is essential. And as a result, the United States Sheep Experimental Station continues to stay in business, living to fight for another day. Shepherding sheep can be very complicated business. Not just in Du Bois, but everywhere as well. And what makes this morning's reading from the Gospel, according to John, compelling concerning Jesus saying that he is the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, is that we think that sheep to be not very bright. They scatter at the drop of a hat. They get lost. They die. And related to all of the stuff studied at the Sheep Experimental Station, these animals can just get into an incredible mess when it comes to interaction with their neighbors. And so a kindly shepherd has to take them under his or her wing and protect them, care for them, basically live and die for them. Of course, in the Gospel, we know that Jesus is really not talking about sheep. He's talking about humanity. But the story of sheep approximates our story. And most of the time, we know that we cannot make it on our own if it were not for the Good Shepherd. This is what I've been preaching on for about 35 years, how sheep are not very bright and how we need to be saved. This is a new year. Because on the other hand, every once in a while, we think that maybe we're not deserving of that unflattering comparison with foolish sheep. And guess what? We actually have good reason to think so. In the Thank God for the Internet department, I found this article from the British Telegraph entitled, "Sheep are far smarter than previously thought." Yippee! And it began, sheep are widely regarded as some of the most dim-witted creatures in the animal kingdom, but new research has revealed that they are far more intelligent than they have previously been given credit for. The telegraphic science correspondent, Richard Gray, writes that sheep can map out their surroundings, they can plan ahead, they can differentiate various containers holding food, they recognize voices, they recognize faces, they can even recognize expressions on faces. They, in fact, test out in certain experiments, as well as mice, primates, and, surprisingly, ready for this? Humans. And to put it in one of the scientists' words, sheep can perform executive cognitive tasks that have never been shown to exist in any other large animal except for monkeys. Case in point, some sheep are so smart that they have figured out how to cross over those cattle grates. You know those things that when you have the rural road and you got the grate and then you have the highway? They cross over those things by, you ready for this? Rolling over them on their backs. Sheep are smart. Well, that's great, because if we can believe ourselves as bright as these astute sheep, humanity then, in its collective wisdom, can begin to think, maybe we really don't need the shepherd after all. We can make it on our own. Maybe by our cleverness, maybe by our wit, and our ability to perform executive cognitive tasks, whatever those are, not unlike, well, sheep and monkeys, we can get by just fine. And that's the point when Jesus says, and now you know why my job as the Good Shepherd is so complicated. Fact of the matter is this. When we view ourselves as really sophisticated, we can believe that the forgiveness of sins can be replaced with our just kind of explaining normal behavior. We can toss grace aside and we can go back to trying to merit approval. And we can attempt to achieve holiness by works rather than just accepting that we are in fact the beloved apple of God's eye. In that article I referred to, Professor Jenny Morton, a neuroscientist at the University of Cambridge, prefaced her thoughts about how intelligent sheep were by saying, sheep, though, have a reputation for being extremely dim, and their flock behavior backs up that, as they are very silly animals when they are in a group. If there is a hole, they will fall into it. If there is something to knock over, then they will knock it over. Well, now that's beginning to sound familiar again. Of course she's right. Together, despite our intelligence and our best efforts, we also have to admit that we can fall very easily into the hole of pride, and we are forever knocking over the gift of grace. And we can't help it. It's just in our nature. And so even in our worldliness, at our fineness, we still find ourselves yet again caught in a thicket, walking in the wrong direction, and stuck in the mud. Curiously, when that happens, we do not hear in the distance a voice from the clouds saying, I told you so. What do we hear? We hear from the Good Shepherd who is pulling us out, dusting us off, comforting us in our afflictions, saying, I love you. I love all of you. I love even those who you do not recognize as being a part of the flock. I love those who are outside the fold. I love you when you are clever and not so clever. I love you when you are bright and not so bright. I love you immeasurably. I love you unconditionally. How can that be? How can God's love be so expansive, not unlike that of a good shepherd, so as to embrace even those who turn away with pride just because they have figured out how to roll across those cattle grates of life on their back? How can God overwhelm with love those who may not even want to have anything to do with God or with the church or with Jesus? How can God continually stand in the driveway every moment of every day, looking down in the distance and hoping for a glimpse of the wayward or the prodigal son or the prodigal daughter coming home, and not carry judgment, but instead have arms just aching to welcome and to embrace? In other words, how can God love not just the squeaky clean sheep who can do executive cognitive tasks, but also the smelly old goats like me, who will wander off and who will fall in the ditch? It's kind of funny, but that's what they wonder about at the human experimental station every day. And they may never figure it out, but that's okay, as all that really matters, I think, is that we notice the Good Shepherd watching over us. And maybe since we know his voice and now we recognize in one another the face of Jesus, we will respond with love, because besides being called sheep, we are also called friends by Jesus. And that's all he's ever intended us to be. Shepherded friends who love one another and as such go out and make quite a difference in the world. Amen.